Alexis de Tocqueville published the famous Democracy in America in the 1800s. Politicians, historians, philosophers, and teachers have all used democracy in America. Tocqueville objectively observes all elements of American life, draws logical conclusions with abundant but uncited supporting evidence, uses a sophisticated writing style, and implements adequate organization. Alexis de Tocqueville published the first volume of Democracy in America in 1835 and published the second volume in 1840. Tocqueville wrote Democracy in America after visiting America in 1830 on the basis of carrying out King Louis Philip's commission to study the American prison system. The scope of Democracy in America goes well beyond the prison system and includes a cultural, social, political, historical, and geographical analysis of democracy in America and its implications and applications in America and Europe, especially in France. Tocqueville wrote Democracy in America to answer two questions. Why did France's democracy develop so differently than America's? And how did America change from the ancient regime to American democracy? Tocqueville answered those questions in order to provoke a different question. Should France attempt to implement American democracy, or should France implement a different method of democracy? Tocqueville intentionally did not answer this question. He only wanted to educate the French about democracy and its effects and stimulate well-informed debates. Tocqueville recognized three factors necessary for the maintenance of the liberal democracy in America. The first factor, special outer circumstances, contributed to America's democracy through the lack of neighbors, resulting in no great wars, fewer taxes, and fewer armies, as well as a huge, prosperous land. The second factor, the laws, helped enforce democratic ideals. The third factor, culture, provided the necessary mindset and values, since American forefathers emphasized the love of equality and freedom. In analyzing the development of democracy, Tocqueville names one factor from which all other factors stem from, the general equality of conditions. In the introductory chapter, Tocqueville asserts that the equality of conditions is a providential fact, with the characteristics of a divine decree. It is universal, it is durable, it constantly eludes all human interference, and all events, as well as all men, contribute to its progress. Tocqueville supports this by elaborating on how historical events, including the Crusades, wars, invention of firearms and printing presses, the post, and Protestantism, contributed to the advance of equality of conditions. The providential nature of equality indicated that democracy would spread no matter what the leading politicians and philosophers of the day did. However, Tocqueville believed that the spread of democracy could and should be guided. Tocqueville wrote Democracy in America to educate his fellow Frenchmen, not to promote a certain method of democratic government. In the introduction, he states, "The first duty which is at this time imposed upon those who direct our affairs is to educate the democracy, to warm its faith if that be possible, to purify its morals, to direct its energies, to substitute a knowledge of business for its inexperience, and an acquaintance with its true interests for its blind propensities, to adapt its government to time and place, and to modify it in compliance with the occurrences and the actors of the age." Tocqueville wanted the French people to become knowledgeable about the nature of democracy in order for France to make an informed, good decision on how to adapt to the spreading democracy. He recognized that the political culture of America, in which even poor Americans understood and participated in politics, tremendously helped prevent America from falling into the non-liberal and restrictive democracy like France had during the Reign of Terror. Tocqueville lived during the time after the French Revolution and Reign of Terror. Tocqueville descended from an old aristocratic family. His great-grandfather defended King Louis XVI during the French Revolution, but also served as a patron of Helvetius, a philosopher critical of the monarchy. Tocqueville himself maintained a loose affiliation with the Doctrinaires, who promoted constitutional monarchy in France. Tocqueville's parents suffered through imprisonment in the Bastille until Robespierre was overthrown. Many of Tocqueville's relatives died during the Reign of Terror. When Tocqueville journeyed to America, he brought with him an aristocratic background, first-hand knowledge about the failures of democracy in France, and a dislike of the monarchical system. In Democracy in America, Tocqueville presents his observations and theories in an impressively objective way, despite his potentially biased background. Tocqueville draws conclusions based on direct observations of the American people without any prejudice or agenda. He does not try to support or denounce a theory about the American people. He focuses on the change toward democracy, which he neither justifies or refutes, but rather acknowledges its existence and imminent success. Tocqueville attempts to identify the natural consequences of a democratic revolution and, if possible, figure out how best to make it advantageous for France. He explores as many factors and aspects of American life as possible, encompassing almost every single viewpoint and element of society. The only truly limiting bias of Tocqueville involves his focus on applications to France. He uses America and France to make comparisons and applications in the majority of the book. He exclusively focuses on Europe and America and leaves out the rest of the world. However, the French focus gives the book a different perspective and purpose. Tocqueville analyzes American democracy, but also focuses on the effects of democracy in general and the application to other countries, especially France. Tocqueville adds to his credibility and objective perspective by including historical facts and first-hand observations without prejudices and not excluding any aspect of American life. He traveled to America and went as far north as the Great Lakes and as far south as New Orleans. He visited pioneers and city folk in the north and the south, the east and the west. He talked to common Americans as well as politicians and social movement leaders. All of his observations relate exactly what he saw, heard, and logically deduced, without tainting it with his own opinions. For instance, he observed the conflict of race between Europeans, Native Americans, and African Americans, but did not leave out the perspective of any, nor did he hesitate to address the horrors suffered by the Native and African Americans and their dismal future. Tocqueville does not state specific sources or quote any one person, because he did not want to repay the Americans' hospitality with jargon and annoyance by subjecting his sources to the oncoming debates and criticism without their permission or input, even though, as he admitted in the introduction, it lowered his credibility. Tocqueville presented a conclusion, then afterward provided the logical reasoning with abundant evidence through observations and facts. Often, Tocqueville made a general statement concerning democracy, then proceeded to explain how and why the Americans were the exception. In this way, he demonstrated why democracy worked so well in America and failed in other countries, particularly France. Tocqueville implemented sophisticated diction, but presented his observations, logic, and conclusions in an easy-to-understand manner. He wrote with an embellished style, using a multitude of descriptions. Although he aims to educate all of France, his diction indicates his aristocratic and educated background. He does not attempt to simplify his writing style to encourage reading from the common people. Tocqueville wanted to appeal to the great statesmen of France and urge them to start a new political culture in which the growing democracy is guided by good leaders and statesmen, with the support of informed and politically active people. Not only does Tocqueville analyze the development of democracy in America, he also applies the principles to European countries and contrasts the American development of liberal democracy with the inadequacies of the French Revolution in subsequent years. With such an ambitious purpose, Tocqueville must implement good organization to ensure that democracy in America is easy to read and understand. First, Democracy in America is divided into 2 volumes. The first volume presents Tocqueville's observations, while the second volume analyzes the effects of the observations. Volume 1 serves to add credibility to Tocqueville, as he clearly has done extensive research and observation. It also ensures that readers have the necessary background knowledge about America and democracy before they read Tocqueville's theories and applications. Volume 1 consists of 1 book and generally divides into 4 subcategories: America's background, the particulars of American politics, the theoretical principles of American democracy, and the relationships of America's 3 races. Tocqueville divided Volume 2 into 3 books. The first book, focusing on the impact of democracy on the American intellectual culture, consists of 2 sections on the influence of democracy on the action of intellect and on the feelings of Americans. The second book evaluates the impact of democracy on manners, including social manners in America and diplomatic manners abroad. The last book discusses the impact of democratic opinions on politics. Finally, Democracy in America ends with a chronologically ordered appendix and a copy of the U.S. Constitution to provide context and additional background information. Although Tocqueville admirably breaks down the huge content into 4 books, the subsections are poorly organized. Some books have multiple labeled subsections, while other books have no labeled subsections. However, when Tocqueville adds a title to the book, subsection, or chapter, his titles are clear and easy to understand. Overall, Tocqueville organized Democracy in America adequately, but did not organize it in the best possible way. In Democracy in America, Alexis de Tocqueville accomplishes a huge task extremely beneficial to teachers, philosophers, historians, and politicians. Although the organization and citations could use improvement, the clear, sophisticated style of writing, the abundant objective observations, and the logical conclusions make Democracy in America an excellent resource. Tocqueville's purpose, to educate the French about democracy and discern the best possible way to implement democracy, aids politicians discussing the balances and institutions, both negative and positive, of a democratic government. Philosophers can draw on Tocqueville's numerous logical evaluations of the effect of democracy on thinking, manners, racial issues, gender roles, and other elements of culture. Tocqueville's numerous theories on cause and effect concerning political, social, cultural, geographical, and historical elements and democracy provoke profound discussions for teachers, philosophers, and politicians. Tocqueville's detailed first-hand observations of daily life, culture, thinking, and politics in America provide historians with a primary source for American history as well as for the French culture of the 1800s. This Yale professor elaborates.
Democracy in America, to put it simply, is the most important work about democracy that you will ever read. To compound the irony, the most famous book on American democracy was written by a French aristocrat who might have been deeply foreign, if not hostile, to the manners, customs, habits of a democratic society. And from the time of its first publication in 1835, the book was hailed as a masterpiece. John Stuart Mill called the book a masterpiece that has at once, he says, taken its rank among the most remarkable productions of our time. Tocqueville has come to take his side, his place, alongside of Washington, Jefferson, and Madison, almost as if he were an honorary American. And as if this were not enough, a recent translation of the book was recently inducted into the prestigious Library of America series, which seems to put the stamp of naturalization on a book written in French for Frenchmen and yet it is part of the prestigious Library of America, as Tocqueville might have said, you know, go figure. I don't know how to say that in French, actually.
Alexis de Tocqueville created an amazingly extensive and applicable book containing observation, cause and effect analysis, and comparisons concerning democracy in his well-written book, Democracy in America.